Really is something. David Ignatius, we showed some clips of last year and this year. Obviously, a big difference. You know, something occurs to me this week that we had the meeting with Boris Johnson, and then we have the G7, and now we're having NATO, and every step of the way. We had Boris Johnson. Yeah, well, he's going to meet with Putin later this week. G7, yeah, then he's going to meet with Putin. You know, you start adding up. Which I'm a dork. I always go back to, well, what was our GDP last year? We're 21 trillion. The EU's about 19 trillion. If you still, and I still add Great Britain, they're still our allies. That's $40 trillion of wealth a year. $40 trillion of wealth a year. Chinese 14, 15 trillion. That's pretty good. That's almost the Japan that can say no. You remember that book from '89? The Japanese were going to turn us into their granary, right? Russia, 1.4 trillion. Now, it seems to me, if we just take care of the home team together, this is what I wish politicians would explain. That's $40 trillion of strength and wealth. And you look at our defense spending, it dwarfs like China's, Russia's, all of these enemies we obsess about every day, and yes, we should be concerned. But still, David, I wonder if we're continuing to focus too much on the wrong thing instead of just focusing on how important having good relations with our best allies, how important that really is, and how we are unassailable if we take care of first things first.
You know, Joe, this trip has been an object lesson in that it's always sensible to remember the numbers, just how strong the U.S. is. But we had a demonstration of this week. The Biden team talked in their preliminary conversations about the trip that they're going to say America's back. They're going to remind the world of American leadership. But we saw this week exactly what that means in practice. Mm-hmm. I'm told that every one of these meetings involved leaders who were almost clamoring to sit down with Biden. You had a difficult leader like President Erdogan of Turkey, who was ranting before the meeting. Somebody that zipped it, said nothing. Biden gave a bland statement about how it was productive and whatever.
By the way, like so many other leaders on the world stage, he has a long-time relationship with Erdogan.
So he has a long-time relationship, but I think the point is that this theme, America's back, now has a practical face. And that's Biden. He's calm. He doesn't take the bait. People say, is Putin a killer? He wants to, just refuses to repeat that on the eve of his meeting with Putin, because he's a lot calmer, comfortable in his position as a leader. So, on the eve of the meeting with Putin, which really does matter, I think Biden can say he got everything out of this trip so far that he would have wanted, and most of all, the basics that you're talking about. America's strong. Our economy is growing like gangbusters. We vaccinated this huge percentage of our population. He is the strong leader of this alliance. Just showed it in England and in Brussels.
The messaging matched the moment. NATO leaders used yesterday's meeting to show a unified front against threats from Russia and China. The group collectively declared China a global security challenge, citing the country's, quote, assertive behavior. As for Russia, leaders said there would be no, quote, business as usual on the world stage until Russia demonstrates compliance with international law. But in Biden's news conference yesterday, the Washington Post's Ann Guerin, to the point we were talking about here, asked the president how he reassured allies that American democracy is strong in the wake of the attack on the Capitol.
Said several times that America is back at allies' side. But a lot of those allies are themselves pretty rattled by what happened on January 6th, an attempted overturning of your election. And they may still be alarmed by the continued hold that Donald Trump has over the Republican Party and the rise of nationalist figures like him around the world. What do you say to those allies? What have you been saying to them at these meetings about how the next president of the United States can keep any promises you make?
What I'm saying to them is, watch me. I mean, I'm not saying any of them, quite frankly. I'm just going out. People, as I've said before, don't doubt that I mean what I say, and they believe that I keep my commitments when I say it. The leaders I'm dealing with in NATO and the G7 are leaders who know our recent history, know generically the character of the American people, and know where the vast center of the public stands. Not Democrat, Republican, but who we are. We're a decent, honorable nation. And I think that they have seen things happen as we have that shocked them and surprised them that could have happened. But I think they, like I do, believe the American people are not going to sustain that kind of behavior. The Republican Party is vastly diminished in numbers. The leadership of the Republican Party is fractured. And the Trump wing of the party is the bulk of the party, but it makes up a significant minority of the American people.
So I have to appreciate just him methodically, honestly, Elizabeth, answering the question. I don't disagree with Anne's question. I think there's a lot of questions on the world stage that address the issue as to whether or not this is this a 4-year blip and then America continues to slide, or is Joe Biden going to put a stake in the ground and keep us moving forward in the democracy that we are? But yet the stories that David is sharing about world leaders clamoring to get in America's face and the America is back statement, while it's garnering some questions from the press, I'm not sure what more Joe Biden can do beyond what he's doing, which is messaging and showing.
It's true. You saw how long it took him to answer. I mean, there
took his time.
There was a long pause before he started answering the question. And obviously the White House is concerned about that. And, you know, that underneath all of this, you know, this warmth and celebration of Joe Biden is real concern among the European leaders, that, as you say, that this is just an interregnum between Trump
and
another Trump, and Trump again, or a Trump-like character. And what happened on January 6th shocked us, shocked the world.
For sure.
It's still out there. You see the number of Republicans who support Trump, who think that Joe Biden is not the properly elected president. So it's worrisome. It worries this White House as well. It worries the Europeans. So Joe Biden, you're right, can't promise that this is now going to be smooth sailing from here on in.
And yet he must.
He has to, right?
And yet he must.